Hey there, Omaha. Welcome into another episode of Restaurant Hoppen. I'm your host, Dan Hoppen, and my guest for this live podcast tonight is a true culinary master. He is the executive chef of the Boiler Room, and the flavors, textures, and components that he builds on plates are things that I've not only had at no other restaurant in Omaha, but any other restaurant anywhere. And you don't have to take my word for his skill, because the James Beard Foundation will do that for me. He's he's been nominated for 4 James Beard Awards, and just 2 weeks ago was in Chicago representing Omaha as a finalist for Best Chef Midwest. This is Tim Nicholson. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thanks, everybody.
So we have a lot to talk about tonight, but I think we have to start with the James Beard Awards. And for anyone who's unfamiliar, the Beards are kind of like they're the Grammys, the Emmys, whatever award equivalent you want to be for the food world. It's a very big honor to be nominated and to be named a finalist and to actually go to the awards in Chicago. It's a very big deal. Only 5 people from the entire Midwest, 5 chefs, were selected to do that. You're, I should mention, one of 2 Omaha chefs ever to be named a finalist. The other was David Utterback from Yoshitomo last year. What was it like to get that call? I mean, you've been nominated for a Beard Award before, but what was it like to get that call and hear, holy cow, I'm a finalist for this thing?
Yeah. No, so it's funny because every time I feel like I've been nominated or become a semifinalist, and then in this case, finalist, I always find out through like a text message where someone's like, congratulations. I'm like, for what? What happened? I just wake up to this message, and that morning I parked at work. It was the week of April Fool's, actually. And I'm very happy they didn't announce it on April 1st, because I would have never believed anyone when they said it. But Kane Atkinson, who ended up going to Chicago to cook at the James Beard Awards, was actually the one that messaged me. And it's kind of like a no way. You're lying, and then you see the pictures like from the James Beard Foundation. You see their story. It's like nationally recognized. Other people are seeing it that aren't in Omaha, or, it's, nationwide. So it became a very big reality. And then, your phone's blowing up off the hook all day. Almost had to put it on silent so I could actually get work done. And go about my day. But it was a surreal feeling that I'm still trying to realize as reality.
So over the history of the Beard Awards, Omaha chefs have gotten a total of 23 nominations. You have 4 of those. So only one Omaha chef, and that's Clayton Chapman. He's got 5. Jenny Coco also has 4, but then you're right there with 4. I know that you are not an arrogant guy. You're pretty humble, at least from what I can tell in our interactions.
Yeah.
But just how meaningful is that to you to see? I know that you're, a big proponent of the Omaha food scene, and to know that you're playing that kind of a prominent role and getting it recognized on a national scale, how meaningful is that to you?
It's huge. And this one really, I think, struck home for me. My wife is probably my biggest supporter and fan. But when I don't like to count accolades or post them on walls, but this one really struck true. Like you said, it's down to 5 chefs from 8 states. Some that were on Top Chef, some that have been nominated several times prior. So to be in that group with them and to see your name alongside and to be in a room with chefs that you looked up to for decades, it really rings true. And, this one meant something for sure. I think for myself and Omaha as a food scene.
And we will get more into that shortly. But first, I think we need to make sure we introduce the Boiler Room. Which, I mean, if you haven't been to the Boiler Room, guys, get to the Boiler Room.
Come say hi.
I think this is the only thing I'll say about it. My birthday is one of those excuses to go out to a nice restaurant and not have to worry about how much we're spending. And that's where I want to spend my special day. Last 2 birthdays have been at the Boiler Room, and I haven't really even thought much about it because I love that place so much. I love the atmosphere. So if somebody's in this room right now, or they're watching or listening, and they haven't been to the Boiler Room before, how would you describe it to them?
Oh, man. We were talking yesterday at the farm, how I always describe it as perfectly imperfect, where it's a building, if you haven't been in, you walk in and you're on the second floor, and it's a rustic, raw brick wall, steel girders. It looks a little grungy, but then there's white tablecloths on all the tables. White plates. It's executed as perfectly as we can. Craft cocktails, but you get a eagle-eye view into the kitchen of what we do, where we don't hide anything from you. It's everything is, as good as it can be, and we have a strong focus on local farms, sustainably caught seafood. I have relationships with farmers that have been going on since the day I've been there, and it's an incredible place. I fell in love with it the first time Amy and I had dinner there, and the rest has kind of just become history. For some reason, I became the boiler room and the chef of it, and to culture the people that have gone in and out of there has been a love for me and hopefully Omaha.
Yeah, and I want to describe the open kitchen a little bit more, because open kitchens have become a very trendy concept in restaurant design, where diners are actually able to look into the kitchen and see their food being cooked. But what takes the boiler room to the next level is there's just that, like, the ground floor, and then the kitchen is actually on the floor beneath. So if you're sitting on that top floor, you can look down into the kitchen and watch your dish be cooked.
Yeah.
And you can see Tim at the pass calling stuff out. The only bad part is you see how much butter goes into your food. And
it's a lot of butter.
And then you realize, your workout the next day is going to be a little bit longer than you anticipated. Regardless, it's fantastic. It's fun. And I think you really enjoy just working there, too, because you've been there since 2010. We're talking 13, 14 years. That's a long time for a chef to be at one restaurant, especially when it's not like your restaurant. You don't own it. You didn't start it originally. It wasn't your concept, but you've remained there the whole time. What is it about that restaurant that has kept you rooted there, as opposed to trying out other opportunities or even breaking off and doing your own thing?
Yeah. So it was the first place where I got to kind of have full control and creative freedom. It's a small menu. We change it daily. Odds are minimum one thing is going to change on the menu every single day. We reprint, we post it online every day. But it gave me the chance to kind of grow as a chef and do things that, I dreamed of or saw online or wanted to try. So being able to have just full reign of pretty much whatever I wanted to do, just made me fall in love with it. And I grew up working in restaurants and steakhouses where it was the same thing every day. And this, it's, even though it is the same restaurant, and you can probably attest every time you come back, and even me when I'm there every day, it's not the same restaurant. We're always changing. We have, new ingredients come in with the season change, with, different farmers, different local purveyors, and just being able to utilize that and draw inspiration from everything that comes in, whether it's new employees or new ingredients. It always makes Boiler Room ever changing, which is why it's easy to stay in love with it.
Now, I'm sure on one hand, having that constantly changing menu, that's a blessing as a chef, like you talked about. It doesn't get boring. You're not cooking the same thing again every day. It's constantly changing. Your brain is constantly being reinvigorated. That's also got to be a challenge, though. Yeah. I mean, especially after 14 years, to not have dishes that are getting stale, but to and obviously you have things that return to the menu.
Yeah.
But to constantly be innovating and coming up with new things, I mean, that's a lot of pressure to do that as well, right? What's that balance like between having just this awesome creative liberty, but also kind of this pressure to always be coming up with something new and interesting?
Well, and that's where having more people come in, especially like my sous chef and people that have had the ability to travel the world and work at other restaurants and, draw inspiration and see different techniques and allow them to bring that. Like Mikey, my sous chef now, is like, hey, I really want to make house vinegars, which is something I had never done before. So it's like, okay, let's do it. He did it. He worked at Husk in Nashville, and they did it there. So we had a strong, grasp on how to do it. But then we're big into utilizing everything, every inch of what we get. So we're making vinegars from mushroom stems, scraps from strawberries, apples. That way, nothing is really wasted. We can utilize everything and then turn that apple cider vinegar into vinaigrettes that dress on the salads in springtime, wintertime, when we can get fresh greens. But really just learning from those around me, which is really fun, especially when young cooks come in. They want to do something, but they've never done it before, so it kind of forces me to relearn it again and to show them the right way to do it, which I often joke about, because they saw it online or they wanted to do it at home. And, there's a way to do it at home, and then there's a way to do it in the restaurant where we have all the resources all the time. We can take a week to do it, where at home you want your short rib braised in a day. You throw it in the crock pot before you leave for work. I do it all the time. But at work, that process takes us 3 to 4 days rather than just a couple hours.
How did you learn to not only trust the rest of your team, but figure out how to empower them to have a voice? Because that's something I think it's pretty difficult, to take down your ego and say, yeah, this guy's only been working for me for 3 months, but that's a really cool idea. We're going to run with that. It's also hard to get depending on personalities, there are some loud personalities, but it's hard to get somebody who's been working you for 3 months to have the boldness to come and say, hey, I'm going to take my idea to Tim Nicholson, who's been here for 14 years and knows a couple things. How do you kind of train your employees or empower them in a way to say, I really care about what you think? So
in the back of the kitchen, we have 2 clipboards that kind of hang from the ceiling, and one is an order list and the other one is an idea board, where if anyone has an idea, they jot it down, and eventually we're going to make it a reality. It gives young cooks a sense of, I'm not just a cook here, I'm a part of the team, I'm a part of the restaurant. And when you do that for a cook, let them get a dish on the menu, it really changes their whole perspective and how they're going to dedicate more of their time, their energy, not in a bad way or overworking them way, but there's the sense of pride that they have when they come to work, when their dish is on the menu, is way different than when you come to work and you're just executing what's told. It changed for me when I was there, and that's the culture that has always been there since I've been the chef and will never change.
Gosh, you segued beautifully because we can applaud that. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about your first dish that you got on the menu.
Oh, man.
Because I'll tell you what it was if you don't remember.
Yeah.
Because I actually went back. Tim was on the podcast previously in 2021. And so I went back and listened to that, and you talked about this dish. And ironically, it was just featured on the menu last month in May. It was asparagus and prosciutto gelée terrine, and it still comes back on the menu every once in a while. And my wife didn't even know the story, and she sent me that Instagram post one day and was like, look at this. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So tell me the story behind that dish, the origin of how it came together, and what did that do for you as far as giving you a voice as a chef?
Yeah. So I'm very rooted in classic cooking. Not big into sous videing or a lot of the molecular stuff. So the asparagus terrine really showcases everything we do at Boiler Room. It's asparagus season. So we have fresh local asparagus. And then we have prosciutto that we cure in-house. Oftentimes they cure for 18 to 24 months. And then, once you're done slicing the prosciutto, you're left with the bone. And instead of throwing the bone away, we make a prosciutto stock. And then we take that stock and we clarify it, and then we set it with gelée, and then we build this beautiful terrine that takes, it takes 4 days to build the terrine and then the rest of the dish before we can even cut into it and serve it. But it's one of those things, and I was talking to the servers, you're going to see it on Instagram and it's going to look perfect, but that dish, if you come in every night, it's going to look exactly the way it was online. And I think that's really fun for diners to go in and see the dish that they saw online in front of them in reality, and then be able to eat it and taste all those flavors and see. That's one of those dishes that you can taste and see all the hard work that went behind it and really kind of showcase what the restaurant can do. But yeah, that was one of the first brainchilds I had there that I was really proud of, and kind of saw the chef I was becoming, and executing those classic techniques with Midwest ingredients in a somewhat upscale way, and also look modern at the same time.
If you guys are on social media, Facebook or Instagram, I would seriously, you should be following the Boiler Room already, but even if you're not, go back and look. I mean, you just have to go back like a month and look for that dish. It is absolutely stunning to look at. So when you make that and you kind of get that ownership and, you know, that sense of pride, honestly, like, hey, I created something. Like, this is mine. This is really cool. How does that influence you as you grow into a leader yourself of being able to take that feeling and try and give it to others?
Yeah, I think so. When I brought that dish back just the other month, I think it was cool to see the new crew that had never seen that dish be composed and realize, you know, the level that we can produce at Boiler Room. You know, not that we weren't executing to that level, but to see something a little more finely tuned rather than being a little more rustic and just all flavorful. It really kind of inspires them to push themselves to learn new techniques, find that something online that they want to learn how to do, and, you know, let's do it. Let's make it a dish on the menu on a nightly basis. You know, and it's pushed everyone there. We made this rigatoni with sourdough pasta that we used our spent sourdough starter and dehydrated it and then made a flour out of it and toasted it and then made that into a pasta. So you know, it just goes back into utilizing everything that we do and making everything scratch from in-house. But, you know, that dish was a brainchild of my sous chef, and then, you know, we made a sauce that was inspired by other people around there. So it really takes a whole team to create one dish on a multiple times.
Another kind of strategy that you mentioned on the podcast a couple of years ago is you are not someone who, like a lot of chefs, like, have traveled the world, or they've traveled to a bunch of different cities, cooked in a bunch of different cities. That's not been your background. You grew up here. You've mostly stayed here. So instead of like drawing on a ton of global influences, and I'm sure you do that, especially the more experience you get, but you've kind of taken the strategy of taking like sandwiches or like humble dishes that people grew up eating and they recognize, but you kind of put that fine dining spin on it and present it in a completely different way. Where did that strategy come from?
So it's funny, we just did this farm dinner last night, but one of the times that it really struck was we were doing a Pig's Pinot poetry event where you had to do a dish made with pork. And we took the flavors of a pastrami sandwich, and we made a pastrami pork tongue, and then we made grits, but we used a little rye in it, and then we made a Gruyere fondue to put on top. So we're hitting, you know, Swiss. We had pickled mustard seeds. So to take, you know, what flavors are familiar to you and spinning it into a fine dining dish, you know, it works and it becomes familiar to people. And a lot of people relate flavors with memories and things like that. So if you can make something comforting, even though it looks fine dining, they're going to remember that, and I'm going to remember that.
I will never forget, one of my favorite things that I think I've ever eaten was at the Boiler Room. It was not last birthday, but the birthday before that. You made this agnolotti, which is a stuffed pasta, and then had a drizzle of like your Nashville hot chicken oil.
Yeah.
And it was like a Nashville hot chicken sandwich and stuffed pasta. Like, those two things were like perfectly combined. It made no sense. Like, in my head, I think it broke a couple brain cells, but it was so delicious. And I just love that creativity of being able to say, this is something familiar, whether it's, you know, a Reuben or a Nashville hot chicken sandwich or whatever it might be, and twist it on its head a little bit and present it in a way to someone new where they're like, whoa, I know this, but it's also completely foreign to me. Is it fun to mess with people like that?
It's awesome. And it, you know, I do the same thing with shrimp and grits, where we'd make, instead of using grits on the outside, we take the creamiest grits imaginable, butter, and we fill
There's no butter in grits.
Yeah, right. Then we fill it in a pasta, and then we serve it with sautéed shrimp and shrimp butter. So it's another, you know, fun way to spin especially food trends like Nashville Hot. Like, how can we make Nashville Hot fine dining? And that was a pretty big thing with us. And like I said, Mikey came from Nashville, and he knows how to make Nashville Hot the proper way. And it's more than just butter. It's a lot of animal fat. It's definitely not a healthy treat, but it is good.
Okay, let's get back to the Beard Awards for a minute. Like I mentioned earlier, you've been nominated for 4 of these things. Yeah. In 2017 and 2018, it was for Rising Chef. Mm-hmm. And in 2019, it was Best Chef Midwest, and then Best Chef Midwest again this year. But I want you to take me back to the first one in 2017. You kind of talked about how it's always been a surprise to you. It's been a text from someone else. Yeah. How did you find out that time? And as someone who had never been nominated before, what was the feeling like?
So I think I had just taken over Boiler Room. Paul Kulik was the founding chef, and he opened up Label Jan. And, he had, parted ways with the restaurant so he could focus on his restaurant. And I think that was like late November, December that transition happened. And then February of, 2017? Mm-hmm. You get the message. And, yeah, it was like a congratulations. I think it was Dan Watts, who's another culinary stud in the Omaha food scene, if you don't know him.
With Backlot Pizza and Kitchen now, yeah.
But, yeah, it was hey, congratulations on the nomination. I'm like, for what? Was it like – I was expecting something like Omaha-related, like, Omaha Magazine or, Best of Omaha. But then it was James Beard, and I'm like, oh, that's more than local. Like other people are going to see my name. And it really kind of made me realize that there's a spotlight, on Omaha now, and maybe even myself a little bit. So it kind of, it was overwhelming where now we have to be, better than we were yesterday, every day moving forward, which is daunting and stressful. But then you kind of just ride that high of, okay, obviously we're doing something right that's being recognized, so let's just keep doing what we do. And yeah, it just kept happening from then on.
So you're nominated as a semifinalist for 3 years in a row there, 2017, 2018, 2019. And then apparently you just forgot how to cook until this year because you went 5 years without a nomination. I don't really understand how that works. Right. But as a chef, does that hurt your confidence at all? Like, to have it 3 consecutive years, you feel like, okay, I'm on the up, and then just every year the nominations come out and it's just like, wait, what's going on? Was there any of that feeling at all, or is it just kind of like, it's just a bonus if it happens?
Yeah, definitely a bonus if it happens. Honestly, it was nice to have a little break, and breathe a little. Because I was talking to Dave from Yoshitomo, and like once you're in, it's like a whole year's worth of waiting for this to happen. Where you feel like you can't let down, you can't slow down, you're constantly getting scrutinized or looked at, and people tend to focus on the negatives more than the positives in this industry. So those hurt more, and you look at those more than every positive thing that anyone's ever said. You could have 2,000 positive reviews, and it's the one negative one that you really look at and stare at. But what was cool, I think, in those vacant years for the Boiler Room was that Omaha was still being recognized. And it's one thing to look at there and, you don't see your name, but when you see Omaha still on there. So I think Al Courant got it. I think Yoshitomo got it.
Block 16.
Yeah, Block 16.
Kane himself.
Yeah, Kano. So the fact that Omaha was still represented was, I think, bigger than just to see the same name over and over. Because then you realize that Omaha as a whole is getting looked at, not just one person. Because sometimes that's, it almost seems unfair. It's like, well, why aren't these other restaurants that are just as good, executing at the same level, if not higher, why aren't their names on there? So it was great to see that. And then these past years, it's been multiple Omaha chefs. So I think it's only a matter of time.
You said something really interesting there. You said in this industry, there tends to be a lot more focus on the negative than the positive. Why do you think that is?
That's a great question. Sometimes it's just the littlest things that people, that sets them off. But I think it's more, maybe the way I perceive it. Seeing a negative review that affects me because I really want everyone to leave having such a good time. And even if you don't like your food, I'd rather cook something different or recook your dish rather than have it, affect negatively on the restaurant, because we really do care that much, where we'd rather, have to remake something and hide our ego than to, have it, impact us in a negative way.
So I want to get into just the impact of like how big of a deal it is to be named a finalist, even versus semifinalist. So for each category, so that would include Best Chef Midwest, there are 20 semifinalists each year. So you're talking 20 restaurants for the Midwest, that's 8 states. That's a really big deal. But that is then whittled down to a final 5, and the finalists are invited to Chicago. So, you're the best of the best at that point. What does that do for the team at the Boiler Room when you got the nomination and we're going to Chicago? I mean, what does that do for morale? What was the team's response?
Oh, they were pumped. I mean, honestly, that was a day of like celebration, from everyone. I mean, it was an outpour of love from the restaurant, from, my boss, the owner, from just family, friends, everyone in the industry. And then, you get people reaching out from not Omaha that want to follow the Boiler Room. We got people driving, from Denver to Omaha to eat there because they saw we were nominated.
Oh, wow. People
from Minneapolis driving down. So it really brought, a Midwest community to Omaha just to see what we're doing. It was pretty amazing to see.
So what kind of conversation do you have with the team then? Because, I mean, like, do you have to rally them and be like, okay, guys, we got to be, like, extra on point here? Or do you have to go the other direction and, like, tamp them down and be like, all right, I know we're all nervous. There's, people here from all over the country, but we're still doing our thing. Like, what was your approach as a leader?
Yeah, so for me it was, obviously this happened because of what we were doing. So as nervous as it is to, think you got to keep pushing super hard and do new things and better things, it's really just comes down to executing everything consistently, which is why I think the Boiler Room gets noticed so much. It's more than just cooking good food. There's a culture. There's, how you treat your employees, how the restaurant, relates with the community, how long you've been in restaurant, things like that. But for me, it was really just, all right, we got to keep doing what we were doing. We can't slow down, but we also don't need to stress so hard about it, because obviously we are recognized for this exact reason. And then also getting the front of the house, that is incredible just to maintain that, because they're the ones harvesting a lot of the discussions with the table. So really just educating them on what the James Beard Award is. That way they can describe it and be excited about it and relate that to the guests. But I have an incredible crew, top to bottom, front to back, that it wasn't a hard thing to instill in them and get them excited about. So
you go to Chicago for a couple days, and I'm just curious. I think the awards were announced on a Monday night. Is that correct? Well, what did you do the rest of the time? I mean, I followed some of it on Instagram, but I'm so curious. Like, what do chefs do when they're at the Beard Awards, but they're not at the Beard Awards?
Yeah. So that weekend was pretty wild. They had a lot of events scheduled. Starting Saturday, there was 2 events, and then Sunday there was a couple. Monday there were like brunches and things like that, but I didn't want to fill up my Monday with more to do than focus on my nerves. But yeah, no, we made a weekend out of it. Amy, my wife, and I went, and it was fun to kind of schmooze, kind of bump elbows with all those people and network and see what it's about. And that was the funnest part. Was, as nervous as I was, it was fun to learn. Not fun, but, relaxing to learn that everyone else there felt the exact same way. Whether I saw them as a role model or a peer, everyone that was nominated and in those same shoes was just as nervous and, excited to see what the final outcome was. Because when you wait for an answer from February to June, that's a long time to kind of see, just tell us already. Luckily I'm not a guy that has crazy high anxiety, so I was able to ride it out, until that day. Then I got a little nervous. But, yeah, no, it was a wild ride.
So what is it like to, be rubbing elbows with all, top chefs from not only the Midwest, but around the country? I mean, do you guys talk about food? Is food the last thing you want to talk about? Or what are those conversations like?
Yeah, when you meet the guys that are, kind of pseudo celebrities or actual celebrities. That day, the day of the awards, there's almost not enough time to spark up a true conversation. They're getting there. There's 1,500 people there, so it's hard to get more than a quick picture and talk about, what are you nominated for? Where are you from? What restaurant are you? And then you're on your way. But there was an event on Saturday when we got in called Family Meal, which is cool because if you're not familiar with the restaurant industry, we cook a meal for the staff every day we call Family Meal. It's just another one of those cultures that kind of brings the whole staff together. Everyone gets to eat. You get to work on a full belly. And it makes you realize that, we're all family here. We're all going to eat at the same time, talk about everything. So it was cool that they had that event set up, and it was, in this person's, I want to say mansion, but it was Chicago. So it was just a huge house, multiple levels. And every room you went in was just packed. I mean, people wall to wall. Any horizontal surface, there was someone sitting on it, someone drinking, food everywhere, just filled with it was sponsored by Yeti, so just Yeti coolers. Everyone had a Yeti cup. It was wild, and it was a room where everyone looked familiar but also unrecognizable at the same time. But when you get a group of chefs or just culinary professionals, there's something to talk about with everyone. And my wife, they had this ham stand where you could slice your own prosciutto. And she ends up talking to this guy who ends up being a wildly famous chef. And, she's giving him crap about slicing prosciutto. And he's slicing him, having him slice prosciutto for her. And she brings over this whole plate. And, her slices were nice and thick at first, but then he coached her the right way. But it was nice to have her along because she has the gift of gab and isn't shy at all, where I get a little clammed up, especially when I'm around people that influenced me so much. I'm they're not gonna want to talk to me. But once you get in there and you get a little relaxed, maybe have a cocktail, and it becomes easier to meet all those folks.
So you got a chance to meet, or at least take pictures with, I don't know how deep into conversation you got with everybody, but some really famous chefs, from Marcus Samuelson to Art Smith to Gregory Gourdet. I saw you even had a photo with Dan Jacobs, who was on this last season of Top Chef, and Sarah and I were in the middle of watching that. I was like, oh, he met Chef Dan. That's awesome. What is maybe your most lasting interaction with someone? And it doesn't have to be someone famous. It could be another Midwest chef. It could be somebody from Wyoming, whatever. What interaction do you feel like is going to stay with you the most from that event?
Oh, man. I mean, meeting Dan was cool because he was also nominated for Best Chef Midwest. And what I thought was kind of interesting was I feel like I was the only one from the Midwest category that made a point to find all the chefs from the category to meet them and shake their hand and, congratulate them and see what they were all about. And because, Dan was nominated for Easter Eve in Milwaukee, and I thought he was going to get it. I was like, he's on Top Chef. He has all this, publicity right now. Of course he's going to get it. But he was really humble, very down to earth, shook our hand. We had a drink together. He talked about his experience on Top Chef, which is something my family's been begging me to do forever. And there was always a joke if we won the James Beard, we'd go on Top Chef. But I'm not a big, camera in my face guy. I feel like I wouldn't give him enough, fodder to make me a villain or a good guy on Top Chef. But
you'd be a good guy. Come on.
His impact was really cool because he talked about, a little bit. He kind of spilled a little bit of a spoiler. He told me that Morimoto had cooked for him, and I don't think that episode had aired yet. He was like, Morimoto cooked for us, just 4 of us, and told us to critique his dish. And he's like, not going to happen. So, he was like talking about how great that experience was. And, I think this whole semifinalist nomination has kind of led me to kind of dive in a little bit further and become, maybe a little bit more of a personality than I was prior, and to accept the fact that, these awards keep happening for a reason. And as much as I want to give credit to everyone else, I need to accept some of the credit for myself, which I don't do enough because I do have an incredible team.
Why do you think that's important?
Which part? Having an incredible team?
No, they're just that you've learned that to accept a little bit more of the credit instead of always deflecting.
I It was honestly a guest was leaving because they were congratulating me leaving the restaurant, and I was, like giving credit to the team, and they were like, well, maybe you could just accept it and say that it was you. And I was like, you know what? Like, I don't know you. I know you've probably been at this restaurant before, and, thank you for saying that, because it did kind of open my eyes that, I think you and I were talking, prior to this podcast that, there's a reason that people want to work at Boiler Room, and it's more than just cooking good food. It's having a good leader and someone to mentor them and, push them in the right direction, because I know people aren't going to stay at the restaurant forever. So I love culturing those people and leading them on. And I know I'm a very big reason that a lot of people have gone on to Michelin-starred restaurants and have the motivation. And not only do they have culinary skills, but they have, very quality human skills that they can, take with them and, also be quality people.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a huge value in being humble, and that's something that I really value in people. But at some point, yeah, you have to, just for your own self-worth, be able to look at it and be like, you know what, I am pretty good at this. You look at the food coming out of this kitchen. You look at some of the people who've worked for me and what they've gone on to do now. Even some of the people who are still at the Boiler Room, like you talk about Mikey. I mean, that's a guy who started off at lower stations, and now you were telling me before the podcast, like on a night when you're not there, he's running the pass.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, he has a lot of skills, but you also helped train him. So I do think that there's a value in being able to look at yourself and say, yeah, I've got some skills here.
100%.
As you look back, and maybe this will be a better question in a couple months or even a couple years, but as you look back at just the whole process, the nomination, the being named a finalist, going to Chicago, going to the awards, everything, what is your number one takeaway? Like, what do you think you learned from that experience that'll help you moving forward?
Yeah, I think honestly, it's what we just talked about, like becoming more of a face, more of a personality for the restaurant and for Omaha. There's a lot that I learned, from other chefs doing a lot of charity events and charity work. There's more that we can do for the community that is not just cooking food and serving it in a restaurant. There's, a bigger outreach that, we can do when you have that type of spotlight on you, where people are going to listen and care. Obviously people want to come maybe hear what we have to say, which is really cool. And it's, for me, it's going to be figuring out how to do that and make it, possible. Because planning big events like this isn't my strong point, but, moving forward, it's going to be doing more like that, like the Long Walk Farm Dinner yesterday, and having a community of people that want to support that and do that, having Long Walk kind of put that all together in yourself as well. Those events are huge, and they bring, a lot of national spotlight to the Omaha community.
So what Tim is referencing is he's doing this podcast. He's an Iron Man right now. There was an event at a Long Walk Farm in Council Bluffs yesterday. He competed. Yeah. He was in that heat over the flames, cooking and grilling for over 7 hours and serving, I think, like 75 people, multiple courses.
80
so
with staff,
yeah, and then you turn around and come and do this dopey podcast tonight. So as if you needed a reason to thank this guy. Yes, we have air conditioning tonight. Yeah, thank goodness.
Yeah, it was hot. I'm surprised I'm not more sunburnt. I was scared I'd just be a glowing red balloon on top of the stage, but no, it was fun.
So with David Utterback being named a finalist last year, you got it this year, and you mentioned it's not just been one or two Omaha restaurants or chefs, but it's been consistently 3 or 4 every year. It kind of feels like Omaha's knocking on the door. Do you get that perception as well, that the perception of our food scene is really starting to get some, if not national recognition, at least seriously regional recognition? Without
question. I mean, Dave, he was nominated for Outstanding Restaurant this year too, which is all 50 states. We were messaging, and he was like, what an impossible category to be nominated for.
Right.
And it's cool as, like, I think he told me that I was a finalist too, semifinalist. And I glanced over the Outstanding Restaurant because Omaha's never had one. Like, why, it was almost like, why would we? And then the fact that he was in it, it's huge. but he's a chef that markets himself well. He's out there. He does dinners all across the country. He's a reason that we have that spotlight. But to see it again this year and to go that far it's been crazy. But it's been fun to talk to Dave and see his experience. To kind of learn a little of like what he experienced, and then have it myself was, a dream come true. Really.
Okay, we've gone 40 minutes into this thing.
Yeah.
And we haven't talked about monster cookies. Yes.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what you were going to bring. When we host these live Restaurant Hoppen podcasts, the chefs, the guests usually bring in a dish, and usually it's something that they cook. Like burger chefs will bring sliders, pizza chefs will obviously bring pizza, things like that. And Tim yesterday told me, I think I'm going to bring monster cookies.
Yeah.
And I was like, that wouldn't have been on my bingo card, wouldn't have been on my first guess. And he's like, no, don't worry, I've got a story behind it. So I have no idea what this is. What's the story behind monster cookies?
So monster cookies, pretty much any time we travel, we have my mother give us a ride to the airport, and it's normally at 4, 5, 6 a.m. This one wasn't so bad. I think it was 6 a.m. But before we leave her car, she had a bag and she had made monster cookies. And like she was having her whole family over to do a watch party, and monster cookies is like her thing that she makes when people are coming over. So it's really cool that we got some, because growing up she would make them, and they'd be for her school. She was a teacher, so we could never have them. So every time there was monster cookies around, it was something special. It was like we're hosting a group of people, and we're going to give them, the special monster cookies, because that's her thing. So it's her recipe. But for me, it was kind of bringing just a little bit of Omaha to Chicago with us, and I think we ended up eating that monster cookie at 2 a.m. or something on one of the days, and it was life-saving at that point. So it was fun. When I look back, it was, that night I wore Ninja Turtle socks with my suit, because growing up, me and my brothers there's 4 of us, we were Ninja Turtles. So it was kind of just reflecting back, like having a little piece of Omaha there in Chicago with us, as sappy as it sounds. But, like you said, like, is Omaha ready for this? There were several watch parties. There was people at Metropolitan Community College that did a watch party. I know my whole work had a watch party. A lot of people just talking to them. It seemed like they were engaged in what happened. Whether they watched the full ceremony or they were checking in every once in a while to see if it was announced. So I feel like Omaha is understanding what it is, and more nationally, to have the community realize how big of an honor this is, it really, I think, is going to bring more focus on the food scene and, what'll happen next.
Which Ninja Turtle were you growing up?
Raphael. I'm the youngest of 4, so the cool one's already taken, right? Michelangelo. No, it was, there's a fun picture of us, like, homemade Ninja Turtle costumes in my parents' front yard. But yeah,
nice.
Raphael.
You definitely don't have his like hot-headed nature.
No, not at all.
But you just kind of got the one that was left.
That's my other brother.
That's all right. I want to talk a little bit more just about that open kitchen at the Boiler Room, because it is so unique. I mean, as a food nerd, I could go to the Boiler Room, and I'd be really sad if I did this because I love your food so much. But I could honestly just sit there and watch and not have a bite to eat and just be like fascinated, because you get to see all the machinations of what's happening and how a restaurant works. Like, you get to peel back and look at the gears turning, and it's just such a cool thing. It's also very unique, I'm sure, as a chef. Like, how long did it take to get used to that, to being that just open and everyone can see you at all times?
Yeah. So I think I've always worked in a somewhat open kitchen. I was at 360 Steakhouse for a while, and everyone walks by, but it's not the center of the restaurant. But starting there, it was a learning to, what are your hands doing at all times? You realize that maybe you're touching your face, or you brushed your hand through your hair. All those things that people see, it's more than just, hey, do we look cool while we're cooking? Like, I'm going to baste this steak for 20 minutes with way too much butter just because it looks cool, It does do a lot of flavor, but there is a little bit of, that's where the ego comes out. Like, people get to see your flair and how you plate and what you're doing at the pass, and, maybe a pan burned up, and that's fun, but, then they get to hear our calls and what we're saying, what we're doing. And it's fun. There's a table that sits right above us. And oftentimes those people will call down and, talk to us and holler at us. And it's fun. It's good when the, diners engage, because sometimes you feel like you're just part of the show. But, we're also people, so you can talk to us. And, it's nice when people come down and, shake hands and say thanks to the kitchen. And it's nice that we have that ability, because other restaurants, when you're just in the back, you don't even see them. You don't get to see all the hard work that goes into it. So that's why people stay at Boiler Room so long when they come to eat. We have to make sure we have enough time to flip the table or have another table open. So, we can allow people to have dinner and a show, because a lot of times that's what people are doing. But it's been a learning experience, and COVID was a big eye-opener for a lot of that. Especially being in the open kitchen, we had to change a lot of
just in
protocols.
In terms of the cleaning and safety protocols?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'm really curious about how you train staff to operate in that environment, because I've probably dined at the Boiler Room 7-8 times. I'm sure you guys get in the weeds and you have bad nights, and you have nights where stuff is just going haywire.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it yet. The thing that is most amazing is it is just like a ballet back there. There's not panic. There's not any yelling or raised voices. It's just clean, boom, boom, boom. Meat gets cooked, meat gets plated. Oh, here comes the sauce. It all just looks like it's functioning so well. And I'm sure that there are times when it's not. I have no doubt, because no restaurant is perfect. But how do you integrate new cooks and chefs into that environment and kind of teach them the dance almost that you guys have back there?
I mean, it's honestly something we don't really ever talk about it. You just
it just
work.
Happens?
Yeah, it just happens. The biggest thing is, like I said, if you see someone touching their hair or something, it's okay, you can't do that. Or, since COVID, you don't taste with spoons anymore. We have little plastic, Baskin-Robbins spoons that we taste with and we can discard. So they're one-time use. But really it all starts with, myself. If I'm freaking out and yelling, it's only going to make things worse, and people are going to, either yell back or get frustrated or get flustered. So if you have a strong core leader that's, in a good mood and, leading the team and steering the ship in the right way, they're just going to follow suit and keep going in the same manner. But, it's a hard thing to run a kitchen, see what's going on, understand what table is on what course, And that's the beauty of the open kitchen for me, because I can see your faces. I can see where you're at. I can see if you're done eating, who needs what. But that's the 14 years of experience there that you can't teach. That just takes time to, see the field and understand what's all going on. So conversely, I enjoy the open kitchen because I can really control that restaurant without you even realizing it.
Well, and you get to see people's reactions.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's one thing to cook behind a wall and know that you're putting out great dishes and everything, but I imagine, especially during a really busy service or a hard service, to be able to look out and see people and see their reactions and see the joy that they're having, that's just got to be the thing that says, yeah, I've been on my feet for 7 straight hours. That's what's pushing me through and getting me through this service.
That's what keeps you coming back. I mean, the rush and getting through a busy night with your closest friends, because you spend 12 hours a day together. It's extremely rewarding, and maybe I'm a glutton for punishment, and I like that rush and doing that and creating with my hands and plating and all the mechanics that go into the restaurant. But yeah, you can even ask all the servers. There's probably not a day that goes by that I'm like, hey, how did table 17 like the food? How are they enjoying their food? What are they doing? Because maybe they don't realize it, but for me, I'm like, man, they don't look like they're smiling. They probably aren't having a good time. But they are, and sometimes it's just you're relaxing and you're maybe drinking your water and you're taking a break from your food. But I really do care and make sure that everyone is leaving there as happy as possible. Yeah.
I want to touch real quick on your start into cooking, because so often I'll talk to chefs and their parents owned a restaurant and they grew up in the restaurant, or they grew up at their grandma's feet in the kitchen just watching her cook all the time, and they were, feeding their family by the time they were age 5, or they grew up and when everybody else is watching Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, they're watching Julia Child and Emerald and stuff like that. Yeah. And that wasn't your path. You actually, your introduction to cooking was supposedly a blow-off class in high school, and you caught the bug. Tell me about that. First of all, like, what got you in that class, in that setting, and then what it was about that class that just grabbed you and never let you go?
Oh, man. So, high school is my buddy Steve. We had, like, all our credits, and we needed, like, an elective class. And he was like, hey, I'm going to take Foods 1, 2. It's going to be funny. So I was like, sure, let's take Food 1, 2. Then I grew up playing music, and my family is pretty, artistic as far as music goes, or drawing or painting. So we're really creative and, like, working with our hands. And, I was in a band in high school, and obviously I had the rock star dream, but I knew that wasn't going to pay the bills. But anyway, so we take this class, and I liked cooking. I realized that, hey, this is fun. We can cook, we can create, the food tastes good. And the teacher was like, hey, we have this culinary competition team. Do you want to do it? And I had another friend in the class that, he was like thinking about going to culinary school. So we joined the team together. And, I think I kind of like just naturally became the leader of that team. And we did a competition at the TAC building downtown. And he actually cut his finger at like the first 5 minutes of the competition. So we had to like pull together as a team and end up like doing all of his work for him because, he was out. And it was that rush, that creativity that really kind of sparked that interest in me. Because, I was always good at like math and physics and things like that in high school, but that didn't interest me. I didn't want to go into a science or something that I considered stuffy and boring at the time. But, when you look at cooking as a ground level, it is science. You're using chemicals, you're using heat, you're applying things like that. So when you look at it like that, it is just functional science that you get to eat at the end of the day. And then, I guess the rest is history from there.
Functional science that you get to eat at the end of the day. That might be the best way I've heard cooking ever described. That was fantastic. I want that on a T-shirt or like a bumper sticker or something.
Can make it happen.
That's really cool. So we talked about the importance of mentorship, more so you being a mentor to others, you giving a voice to young chefs. Who was that for you? Who's like this cooking class in high school and then this culinary team, like that stoked the flame a little bit. You got a little fire going. Mm-hmm. Who was it that like really stoked that fire and made it grow into something that just couldn't be stopped?
Oh, man. There's so many, honestly, along the path. From Joey's Seafood and Grill that I worked in, a chef named Brad Grosser, who was like at Dundee Dell. He owned the Sojourn Cafe. He's just been a great friend of mine ever since. But he really kind of kicked my butt and made me realize that, you really got to want this. This career is tough. It's hard. It's not always nice and pretty. But he really kind of instilled just a hard work ethic in me. And, he made me a lead line cook at, I think I was maybe 18 years old. A lead line cook in charge of people that are double my age. But, at first it was a little hard, but then they see that, you respect them and they understand that you have such a dedication and, you care about the job, that they have no problem listening to you and understanding that, this guy maybe is on his way to do something. And then from there I went to Embassy Suites and I worked with my good friend Joe Pyatt and Tony Soto and Chris Colello and everyone really kind of showed me things that I liked and maybe things that I didn't like in a leadership role, which really helped kind of craft me into what I am today. Taking talent and, passion and creativity and humility and humbleness and, learning from all them and all those attributes that I liked and maybe some that I didn't to lead the kitchen that we have now.
I want to close out the episode here with just kind of some random quick hitters. Like, let's just get to know Tim Nicholson a little bit. What do you most like to eat when you're not cooking?
Cheeseburger.
Cheeseburger, really?
You seen my leg?
Have I seen your leg?
My big cheeseburger tattoo?
I have not. That's a very odd question to ask someone without context.
Right.
But we'll go with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so where's your love for burgers come from?
I couldn't tell you. Yeah, grilling in the backyard at home. But I don't know. I just, Donna Millie's.
Donna Millie's,
Donna Millie's. Barrett's barley corn. Yeah.
Okay. I know you don't get a chance to eat out as much because you're usually working, but let's give a shout out. Favorite Omaha restaurant or restaurants?
We frequent Yoshitomo quite a bit. I mean, Donna Millie's, Barrett's barley corn, Le Bouillon.
Just the opposite ends of the spectrum right there. Yoshitomo to Donna Millie's.
When we travel, too, we do the same. We want your best of the best, and then we want your dive bar.
Yeah.
We want your best cocktail. We want your beer and shot combo. I mean, all the hitters. I mean, Block 16, you got to shout them all out. Le Bouillon. V-Mertz is our Valentine's Day spot. Yeah.
Going back to the cheeseburger answer, I just thought of this. Have you ever spun cheeseburger on a boiler room menu?
I haven't yet. You can't perfect that more.
Fair enough. Okay, I was going to challenge you to do it, but I don't want to now.
I'd rather just put a cheeseburger on the menu.
I would eat a Tim Nicholson cheeseburger.
Dude, I have thought about doing a pop-up. Years ago, we did a competition with Block 16. It was V-Mertz, Block 16, and Boiler Room.
Was it a burger fight?
It was a burger fight.
Oh, I went to one of those. Not
Block
yours.
16 won.
Yeah. Oh, they won.
Another one of those, you lost by 6 votes kind of a thing. Yeah.
Give me a name to watch in the Omaha scene. Who's an up-and-coming chef or just culinary talent that you're just that's the next one to keep your eye on?
I mean, obviously, Drew Stats. I mean, he beat me yesterday.
The chef owner of Semo, yeah.
Semo in Fremont. I mean, he was a stud when he was at Monarch. He's just really creative. And I think once he finds everything that he can do, he's going to be nominated for sure. He's going to be something for sure.
I love that.
Yeah.
Both from your perspective, and I don't know if this came up in your conversations while you were in Chicago or not, but I'm just curious what you think. On a regional and national scale, when people think of the Omaha food scene, what are we known for?
When you're not from Omaha, we're known for, steaks, runzas, corn, soybeans. But I think when you're here, I mean, obviously steaks, I think pork is really, I think we have some of the best pork I've had, in the country. Just from local farmers. I think beef is a little more easily accessible nationwide, so I think that's kind of more of a level playing field. But no, I mean, Omaha, it's becoming more eclectic all the time, but I mean, steakhouses are still really well known. But our food scene's definitely developed over the last 10 years since I've, kind of started in it. And, our fine dining spots are great. And, we travel a couple times a year and eat at incredible restaurants. And to know that our caliber can compete and, maybe even be better than a lot of those places. It's pretty rewarding and fun to see.
You said you're a fan of Top Chef, right?
Yes.
Ooh, there was a pause there. Tell me about Top Chef and what you like and maybe don't like about it.
The more I watch it, the more I feel like people are going to peer pressure me into going on it. But no,
including your wife. Your wife really wants you to go on it.
Ages ago, I came home and she was on the computer, and I had just gotten home from work, and she just asked me a question out of the blue. And she goes, "What is your signature dish?" A question she would never ask me on any other day, but she was filling out the form online for me, and I was like, "What are you doing? Stop!" But no, I mean, Top Chef's great. I think it, showcases rising talent. I think it promotes growth. It obviously kind of not forces, but without, I think, contestants realizing it, kind of pushes them to understanding the chef that they are going to become, which I think is rewarding when I watch the show, or I'll watch it and be like, man, this guy's on TV doing that. And when you kind of see, it's like, okay, maybe we could compete with those people. I don't know if I'd go on to win, but understanding that you're definitely have the skill set to compete at that level is rewarding, whether you're on the show or not.
Favorite chef testant of all time?
Oh, man. Does Padma count?
She's not a contestant, but we can definitely count her. Padma's pretty awesome.
No, we had a joke that we wanted to meet her in Chicago, but she wasn't there. Honestly, Gregory, that we met outside of
Gregor Corday.
Yeah, he was just incredible. And he had a great story. He had an outstanding acceptance speech when he won in Chicago. And I think he's just a great leader and, just stands for a lot of really good stuff.
Okay, we're going to close out with the two questions that I love to end every podcast with. I don't think I've done this at a live episode yet, though. So interested to get your answers, especially 3 years after I think I initially asked you.
Yeah.
But what is one thing about the restaurant industry, cooking, being a chef, whatever it might be, what's one thing about just your expertise and the restaurant industry in general that you think diners don't understand that you wish they did understand?
Oh, man. That's loaded.
Very loaded.
Yeah. I just think the dedication and passion and hours spent, behind each dish, maybe isn't perceived to a diner on every nightly basis. And the care that people put in, maybe it wasn't executed perfectly, but there was some hardworking individual that was behind it that really tried to do that for you. And odds are they were there for a while to create that. And, sometimes I think that's easily overlooked when you just go to a restaurant and order some food and eat.
Mm-hmm. And to end this thing on a positive note, favorite thing about being a chef, being a part of the restaurant industry, however you want to take that?
For me, it always goes back to mentoring, young chefs and the pride that gives me when they move forward. And then also just the creativity and creating, that's not something that people in other careers get to do on a daily basis, is do something that they truly are passionate about and love. And I know that I'm lucky to have found that, especially at a young age, an early age, and then also become pretty good at doing it.
Well, you've become very, very good at doing it.
Thank you.
Anyone listening to this, watching this, if you're in the crowd live, you should be getting out your phone right now and checking reservations at the Boiler Room and potentially making one, because this is a restaurant that will just it will change the way you think about food. It has for me, and I just think it's really special. I love what you've created. I love that you've stayed there and you've mentored and you've created so many great sous chefs that have come up and who have gone to start their own things. It's really, really fun. And I love that you gave us an hour of your time tonight. Well, more than an hour. I mean, you've been here for a couple hours. But to come do this podcast, thank you so much, Tim.
No, thank you for having me. Thank everyone for coming out, too.
All right, Omaha, as always, thanks for eating with us.